Hello and welcome to Property Matters, a weekly look at all matters property designed to be of interest to anyone who has an interest in property. And Property Matters is sponsored by Fairview International Property Consultancy and Town and Country Property Auctions London Limited. We'd love you to get involved in the show, of course. Be part of the conversation. Don't be shy. Put your comments in the comment section below when we discuss our news items of the week and any other point that you wish to make. And if you'd like to get in contact, of course, there is an email address to do that, propertymatterstv@gmail.com. So joining me, as always, with all the learned advice and wisdom and wit, it is, of course, Joe Joshi. Morning, Joe.
Morning, Paul. Morning. Happy bank holiday to everybody. I hope you're all enjoying it. A little bit of sun is out there at least. And I'm not quite sure it's barbecue weather, but potentially tomorrow it could be. Not that I'm going to barbecue, but it's it's good to have a little bit of sunshine. So
Yeah,
and the sun is shining, of
at
course, on
last.
the property, on the property matters and the property world. So, which I'm
Well,
sure you're gonna absolutely bombard me with your fantastic graphs and things, Paul.
well, you're already ahead of the game because, of course, it is.
Oh, there we go.
It is already the time for the monthly report from Zoopla on the UK House Price Index, and needless to say, some quite record-breaking figures. It turns out, Joe, that we are now in the middle of what is going to be seen as a landmark, epic record year. So prices have grown in the last year 4.1%. We kind of knew that anyway. And if you're in certain parts of the country, even more than that, of course. Demand for homes is at a record high of 2.9%, 29%. But of course, the flow of new supply, so that's basically the number of people wanting to buy and the number of homes available. It's still not enough homes for the number of people that are interested. But the big headline, really, Joe, is that we're going to do 1.52 million sales this year, which is what's making it a record year. So this is the biggest year for sales since 2007. And guess what? Of course, that was a crisis year as well. We had a financial crisis as opposed to a health crisis. So it's interesting that this is, now we can see it really is history repeating itself. The government using property to buy its way out, or to sell its way out, if you like, of a situation. And it's going to be one of the busiest years on record since records began in 1959. We've already done 461 billion sales, which is up 46% on 2020 and 68% higher than 2019. And what's interesting is it's the value of the homes that's causing this huge amount of sales. In other words, it's the second home buyer, or the second market home that you're buying, or the third home, so a 3-bedroom or a 4-bedroom or larger. So it's the larger properties that are selling in numbers, as well as obviously the people at the first time end with the benefit of the stamp duty holiday. So kind of nothing that we didn't already know. It's all there in black and white, but it's interesting nonetheless to see that this is going to be a record year, Joe.
Yes, I mean, as we have said a number of times, the government has driven this, and I've always said successive governments, Paul, have used the property industry, the property market, to actually direct and govern its way forward. It's a tool that they've used forever and a day. We in the United Kingdom love the property market. We love talking property, shops, houses, whatever it contains. And of course, you're absolutely right in your figures. I mean, 2007 financial crashes. It was, and then of course the actual recovery came in 2014. It took 7 years for that to actually find its way from the financial crisis. And 2014, 2015 were probably the record years. Just to sort of make sure that you go back and look at those fantastic charts, Paul, because I know you like to do these things. So yes, of course, the housing market is booming. The reason why the second and third generations are moving and working are happening is because what the pandemic has actually made us do. It's made us stop and think about what we're doing, how we live, how our lives have changed or changing. And so those people are moving, needing more space, greener space, more garden space, more working from home space. All of those things are the factors that move. And there are some other underlying issues that probably haven't featured in your charts, but I'm sure they will in due course. But of course, you're going to hear it here first. because I like to bring these first opportunities to the property market and to property matters. And that is that 25, 30 years ago, Paul, a lot of people took out interest-only mortgages. And you have to understand that there is no way of really actually dealing with the capital or the payment of that going back. So this has been fueled by the second and third, which obviously they don't particularly want to make an issue about because it will kind of create another rush. But the point is that a lot of people are thinking, well, actually, I can downsize my mortgage, not my house, my mortgage, and move a bit further out, and actually, have a greater property, more space further out. Now that I don't actually have to go to my office to work every day, traveling is different. So there's that sort of hidden agenda underneath people's second and third moves because they have had these mortgages, and we're all in the same boat to some extent where you've got to do it. I know lenders are probably going to consider extending those periods, but it plays on the back of people's minds that I've got this commitment, and if I don't do something about it sooner or later, I'm gonna be forced to sell, to downsize. And here is a window of opportunity where the government and the market is allowing me to sort of say, okay, this is the time, the interest rates are low, I can actually maybe sell something and clear off, and maybe go and buy something with a lesser loan or a lesser term or a lesser amount, or in some cases no loan or no amount, because it means that they're actually mortgage free, and makes life a lot easier. So there are some other hidden agendas which will come to light. They will come to light in the next if not in the next year, in the next few years, because if you look back at the time of that 25-year term, 25 years ago, I mean, if you just take your 2007 numbers to your figures now, how long is that in terms of time? You've
14
got
years.
14 years that just zipped by, right? So imagine adding another 10 years prior to that, and that's the end of your mortgage. So there's a whole bunch of people that are doing things for other reasons, but of course it's come at the time when the pandemic, the government has come in, they've done the right things and so forth. So that's probably what's taking the limelight. But there are some underlying issues that are personal to people that are probably also driving that sale and that time. And of course, money is to borrow is the cheapest as it's been. The support from the government is there, and the flexibility that the pandemic actually has created made people actually make that decision sooner rather than later. In fact, that's helped it, because all of a sudden they were always worried about, where am I going to find a job? If I leave my job in central London, for example, can I afford to do this? So there was a bit of a shackle around your ankles about not moving from your work, not moving from that set environment, not moving from the schooling, not moving because all of a sudden it would create a whole. But the government and the way we think and work have made that change, and subsequently has fueled the housing market at a time that probably we don't really realize. But it's not just the pandemic. I think there are many, many other things that people are thinking about. I know that, and the reason I share that with you as an example is it's conversations I have had recently off the record over the last, what do I do? This is something that's going to happen. It's something that we've got to think about. And so I know that there are other driving factors that matter. Children are another thing. Children actually, when they've gone to universities and they've gone to their way of life, not often always come back to to roost at home again. They move on. So that's another driving factor where people think, well, actually, now my commitments are not there. Do I need this and do I need that? So there's a whole bunch of other areas that people look at. So the country generally has done well out of, it's the old story, behind every cloud there's a silver lining. Behind somebody's misfortune, there's another man's fortune. And unfortunately, the pandemic has let us make our decisions in a different way. And so subsequently, the house prices have done really well. The housing market has done really well, is doing really well. But the underlying issue is it is the only thing. It's the safest houses, as they say. It is the only thing that people are comfortable in investing in and comfortable in touching, feeling, and seeing. It's something that I have continued to say pretty much every week in, week out, because it's my belief and my honest hand on heart belief that this is the only real investment that people, the biggest investment they make, they feel comfortable, and through generations, it's not changed. I mean, I'm now dealing with fourth generation from my point of view. I've done, 40 years in it, and I've dealt with people in different times, and there's never a let up at all in that time where people turn around and say, "Oh, forget it. I'm never going to buy a house. It's not going to happen." They might do because of personal circumstances, but they come back round. They come back round time and time again because they know that at the end of the day, this is what I want to do. So the rental market will continue to boost, and of course, because the investment will continue to happen, and the housing market will continue to go in the direction that your charts are saying.
Yes, and just to clarify, the sales for the year will be 461 billion, which is up, as I say, 68% on 2019. And so far, we've done £560,000 sales worth 149 billion. I'll get my figures right in a minute. And just the first 4 months. So looking at that in a bit more detail, if we're going to do 1.5 million across the year, and we've already done over 500,000 already, that suggests that it's not going to be equal in terms of the quarters. So they are suggesting that there will be a taper off at the end of the stamp duty holiday in particular. So they do see a slowing down of the market, and there is evidence of that already happening now. So it's interesting to see that Zoopla are predicting that it's not going to carry on like this for much longer.
Yes, that's not any surprise there at all, Paul, because at the end of the day, it's been driven by certain things. The government has given us this huge offering, 95% mortgages, stamp duty reduction. Stamp duty is still not applicable for properties up to £250,000 after the 30th of June. So if you buy something at less than 250, there's no stamp duty. So that race for space is there. If you buy in the north, the chances are you're going to have a lesser cost of stamp duty because the house prices are not as high. Not all parts, but some parts of the north, that is the case, and that is going to be the reason. But in the south, which is the driver of the housing market, irrespective of the fact that London is probably having a quiet time, that quiet time will change, Paul. You watch your charts in the next couple of programs when they allow people to come back into the country freely without having to isolate and be in quarantine. June, July, August is a time when people from all over the world visit the UK for their summer holidays. And so that market will come in. The investor market into London is just teetering. It's just waiting. People want to come in and buy and so forth. So, and then it will have another ripple effect, because when those people come back to buy, those people that are sitting in London who haven't managed to quite do the sales that they want to do will start to have another ripple effect. So there's a stage in everything we do. But currently the stuff that we've been doing is going to come to an end because the stamp duty will come to the end on the 30th of June. So anyone that hasn't bought up to £500,000 is going to have to pay more money for the stamp duty. So we know that that's the answer there. And then, of course, the next thing is the 95% mortgages. And there was, I think, £3 billion or so was put together for that. Sooner as that is exhausted, that will probably need to be either topped up or it will come away. And so and then the time of the year, our summer holidays are about to kick in. So traditionally, every year, sort of kind of come end of June, July, August, everybody might as well go on a holiday because our focus has become we might have to go on holiday, Paul. In fact, we should be doing this program from the beach or something at that time. I think that's the answer. And giving a story on international property. But the point is that is traditionally a time when market slows down anyway. So Zoopla's prediction is in line with what happens normally.
Yeah, and looking at you mentioned areas of growth. and it is the places where it's the greatest affordability that is making the most moves and most noise in the market. So 6.8% increase year on year for Wales, 5.4% for Yorkshire and Humber, and so on, as you can see on there. So looking at the purple line, that's this year, April 21, and the black line there is April 20. So you can see how Wales has shot up. But even if you look last year, prices in Wales and the northwest in general were going faster than London, and actually London's price is only up 1.9. So it's London that's holding the growth back, and it is the north which is going to please the government's agenda for rebalancing the economy and rebalancing the north and south divide. Because if you look at this chart here, you can see so fastest time to sell is along the bottom. So the further you go along the line at the bottom, is the longer it takes to sell your property, and as you go up on the graph, it's the more money you're going to get for it. So basically, inner London, don't even bother about it. It's going to take you ages to sell. And as you go across, you can see you're selling fastest in the northeast, but you're not getting the most increase. But Wales and Humber, there they are at the top of the pile. So you can see how London is dragging the market back. And if we want to have a look at cities, you need to invest in Liverpool, Manchester, Nottingham, Leeds, Sheffield. Not one of these, of course, in the south. Belfast, even Birmingham, and they're the first one. Number 9, Bournemouth, is the next biggest growth area, 4.1%. But it's the northwest and the northeast in particular that's doing the business, Joe.
Yes, absolutely, and of course, Bournemouth. You mentioned there, Paul. Bournemouth is apparently, according to statistics, and I'm surprised you haven't brought this one out, Paul.
Give me time.
Yeah, according to statistics, we like to live by the sea, and subsequently, house prices on all coastal sea view properties have shot up through the roof, and that's probably why Bournemouth features. Bournemouth is one of the areas that is constantly in demand for people that want to go there. I personally call Bournemouth and people at the seaside scenarios where our probate business expands greatly, primarily because we feel that we need to go there to go and sort of call it a day in our journey of life, but because that's kind of what happens. That the largest number of probates are always at the coast, because we think that because we stop working, our bodies stop working, our heads stop working, and we want to just sit there. And eventually, him above knocks on the door. He never sends you a text message or a WhatsApp. It's just time's up, mate. You're coming up. But house prices on the coastal are of a high demand. But yeah, absolutely. Currently, the north is booming. The HS2, when it comes live in the next few years or whatever it's going to do, will only accelerate that. The government has an agenda. The government has an agenda to be liked as blues in the north, because the reds are diminishing rapidly up there, and so subsequently they would like to try and do the balance. So, he's got his strategy right in terms of trying to do the move right. He's also done that good for the prices, and of course he's doing good for the country. So generally, at the moment, it's a win-win situation. It will taper off. It always does. All good things do come to an end at some stage. But what doesn't taper off and what won't change, and I don't have to give you any charts and figures and so forth, is that in 40 years, it's always either gone to neutral, as I call it, or it goes to drive. Very, very rarely has it gone into reverse. And that's the house prices.
Indeed. And looking at the predicted sales for the year, just to put it into context, so 2021, the black line on the far right is what they think sales will be this year. And you have to go back across a whole decade and more to 2007 before you get to a year where there were more sales, over 1.5 million. So that just puts it into perspective. 2004, 5, 6, 7 record years, bumper years back then, and we're now back to those levels of sales as a result of all the incentives and stimulus put into the economy. So that's the latest data from Zoopla, and I mean, it kind of puts it into context, Joe, when we've sat here since last September when we started, and we've been talking about stamp duty and record prices, and it seems like it's the same old record. But the truth of the matter is, we are living through historic times in terms of the property market.
Historic times in terms of property market, historic times in terms of our personal lives, historic times in a silent war that I call the pandemic has created. But we are getting through it. Apart from the losses of the loved ones that some people have lost and we've lost, and we all know someone that is not there. And of course, that is a sad part of the journey that we're all going through. But definitely historic times, and times that we can't even imagine how that would have happened. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day, thinking that here we are talking about house prices and historic moments, and then you look back at the wars, the two world wars, and how did that recovery happen? And if you actually look at that, and it'd be an interesting thing for us to do, it was again the building and the values and the properties and our values as people, human beings, and our wishes and wants and desires that actually made us fight our way through. And that's what we're very good at doing. We're resilient, and as long as we've got a good direction to know, and the government's given that direction, we can come out of these historic moments and continue to create history. So the pandemic has given us a new way of thinking. It's certainly a huge difference in how people are working. I mean, I'm constantly having those discussions with people in terms of the way they're working. And so, I think it's going to be an interesting way forward. I'd like to see, we talk about September, and we've done this now every Sunday since September. It's been an interesting journey, but what has been a constant in that, apart from you and me, of course, we're constant because we're here every time. But what has been a constant is that it hasn't let up in the housing market. People want to invest. This is the key thing, and the people want to look at this all the time and say, well, at least I can touch it, feel it, see it. It's mine. I can go and do the work on it. I'm buying a doer-upper. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. It's one of the highest subjects on any table, let alone a dinner table. Not that there's many dinner tables, because obviously people haven't been able to invite people over for a while. But it's a high topic. It's a discussion, pretty much, I would say, top of the tree.
Comments in so far. Bob says that the 95% mortgages will fall away should the market start to dip. And he also adds that the real effect will become noticeable at the end of September, when the deadline finishes up to 250k. So yes, Bob is predicting, as many are, that the market will fall down at that point, and I think that's probably inevitable, and certainly that's in those figures there. What's interesting, Joe, is that the prices of family houses rose 5.2%, whereas flats only did just over 1%. So that search for space is very much what's defining this boom, as opposed to the first-time buyers, interestingly, which is what we thought perhaps it might be.
Yeah, no, because it is, as I said, if you look at the people that have been moving, it's been the families that have been moving, and there's nothing we could do about it through the pandemic side. But the first-time buyers are looking at the thing in the United Kingdom is there is a system, and the system is that you have to have the run of the ladder, the first run of the ladder. So somebody somewhere has to start that motion of buying the first home, be it a studio, be it a one-bedroom, be it a two-bedroom flat, however it is. And of course, running parallel to that has been the investment market. So those people that have the funds at the top end of the tree go down and decide that I'll buy a couple of flats, I'll buy some properties, and I'll do them up, and I'll rent them, whether it's student accommodation or whether it's just ordinary rental property, whether it's any specific special needs, all that sort of stuff they will do. So there's a parallel run, the first time buyer run, and so forth. And as the first time buyer run gets up that ladder, we go from those people that are in two-bedroom flats, okay, well, I'm going to now maybe get settled down and think about, a family. I'll go into a two-bedroom house with a garden and so forth and so forth. And there's been I think the difference have always fallen at the detached stage. The four-bedroom detached, in an ordinary market is where the families are, and then there's a four-bedroom detached with the countryside and so forth. So that's when we buy lifestyle. We choose where and how it's going to be. And so it might be a four-bedroom family home which because you need it for schooling purposes in a certain area, and then another person buys a 4-bedroom house with half an acre sitting in the middle of somewhere, and because that's a lifestyle, they want to have that because that's what they want to do. So the rise, the 4, 5, 6-bedroom houses and so forth. And of course, then you come to the mansions. Well, that's just another story altogether. We'll do that one another time.
Interesting that Bob's comment about the 95% mortgages will disappear if the market starts to dip. That's an interesting thought, and one thinks that might cause a little bit of panic.
Yeah, I think I'm not quite sure it will. It will. I mean, the 95% mortgage at the moment, protected by up to £600,000 by the government, is been there, and is a certain amount of money that they put in. So they've already said at some point we're going to pull out. That was given to us. I think 3.34, 3.5 billion pounds worth of support. And if you look at the numbers in the grand scheme, 3.5 is not a huge number of 95% mortgages. So Bob's absolutely right. Come that sort of time, it's probably going to taper off. But come that sort of time, we hopefully would have found our feet, having gone through a pandemic that has just made everybody stop and stand still for some time. And then some sort of normality of the market will kick in 2022. It still won't change the fact that people will continue. They'll find if it's a 90% mortgage, it happened before 95% happened. If it's a 90% mortgage, people will still be interested. But he's absolutely right thinking that it will probably drop back.
Well, it might be sooner than we think, because here's some HMRC figures today that basically say that the residential property transactions in April were almost 36% lower than they were in March. So that's a significant drop.
Yeah, it's an indication as to where our thinking is going. But there's also other things that drive that factor from HMRC. And one of them is that some people have thought, well, they're not going to make the stamp duty at the end of June, and probably just decided to focus on other things. And some people have been desperate to get to Portugal and gone. And some people are waiting to go to other parts of the world and probably gone. So our energy and focuses are actually waning to other things that we want to do. But it will come back. We know that it's literally the best investment they will make, and sooner or later they'll come back to that.
And that supply and demand thing that was addressed there in the Zoopla report, the figures here are really quite astounding. 32% of properties sold for more than the asking price in April. That's a third of the market selling for more than it's advertised for. The highest since the previous best, which was only 19% in that time when you said May 2014. So that time when things were booming, as you mentioned earlier. That was the previous highest record, just 19%. Now it's 32%. So, I mean, it's trounced the records, hasn't it? And April saw record numbers of people registering to buy. And it's also the lowest supply in properties in the marketplace since December 2002, which is pretty tough. 22 people for every property, apparently, according to one agent.
Yeah, I think that's a regional thing, Paul. What happens is there are certain pockets and certain parts of the country that have a drive, and people want to go there for a number of reasons. It could be because of schooling, it could be because of the rail links into London. All of those things, location becomes a paramount point. And if it's the right area and the right property, yes, of course, you're going to get 22 people against every one property that wants to look at it. And also you'll find that as time goes on in those particular areas, it's also it's the family homes that are shifting up, because that's the driver that is making those house prices go up. House prices will continue to rise, as far as I can see. Maybe not as at the higher levels, but there'll always be a steady increase. Everything sells, Paul. Everything sells if it's pitched and priced right. If it's priced right, my experience has told me that within the first 10 days of a property coming on the market, if a seller is realistic, the agent has been realistic in doing their valuation correctly, in the first 10 days, you will have had that result done. And we've had that many a times where if we got it right, within the first 10 days that the deal is done. Things that hang around are always things that people are ambitious, or they believe that theirs is something more special and that it's worth more money, and so and also they're prepared to wait. It's not everybody's in a hurry to sell, so people are prepared to wait, and some people have been waiting for years to achieve that. But it is driven by the basics of supply and demand.
Some observers are beginning to say, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, some observers are starting to say that the market really does need to rebalance, and also the government's new properties bill that they were announcing in the Queen's speech needs to sort of kick in really, whereby that they're going to bring the planning, make the planning easier, so that new homes can be built more quickly. So that needs to happen in tandem with a bit of market rebalancing. A lot of people saying that. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that when people are looking to perhaps put the brakes a little bit on the housing market, those voices tend to come from the people that feel themselves that it's getting out of reach of their own desires, and sometimes it's perhaps a personal thing rather than a governmental thing and a general thing. But you can't stop people doing and wanting to do what they feel they want to do. And when people are moving and the moment is right, the time is right, then they're going to do what is right by them, and that's how it will be. Yes, there will be people going, hang on a minute, this is going a bit out of our hands, it's going a bit crazy, so now we've got to put dampers on it. Media does that fantastically. It won't take much, a couple of pages in the media just to start telling you that things are not happening, and it will put the brakes on. The power of media is such, power of government is such that they use media, and these people will come along and say the things that they want them to say. But my view on that is that the underlying driver of what we want to do is driven by our own circumstances, of our life, our family, our work life, and those things. And if those are right, and they align with the things that you want to do, then people are going to move. And fortunately or unfortunately, in the last 18 months, the housing price market has done well, partly because the government needs it to do well, so they've fueled it. They've given us the stamp duty holidays, they've given us 95% mortgages, things that were off the table way before. Why did they do that? They did that because they needed to build their way out of the pandemic. They've spent billions and billions of pounds on furloughs and this and that and so forth. So at some stage they've got to recoup that money. And so the idea was that let's make the housing market. Why is the housing market, Paul? It's very simple. Everybody wants to buy a house. And when they buy a house, they have to repair it. So the DIY companies and the builders and the trades, and it's just forever a growth that happens. So I think that will probably never change. It hasn't changed in the 40 years I've been selling property, because if somebody wants to move, they're going to move. But yes, they are given some direction. There are some drivers that happen, and those drivers and those directions are media, government, and personal things. It's just personal matters.
Just an update on a story that we covered a few weeks ago. I think we both agreed that this was a good idea in principle, but it probably came a little bit too late. But Chris Holland is a guy that started a petition online for the government to suggest that the stamp duty benefit in the transaction actually happens at the point of exchange as opposed to the point of completion. Everybody seemed to agree with him, and within a month he's managed to get 10,000 signatures, but I can't see him. And that the important milestone there, of course, is just to say that the government now has to respond to this petition. They don't have to debate it, but they have to respond to it. And I suspect he'll get a polite, good idea, but not now, thank you, or some other kind of brush off, I suspect. But it's a shame somebody didn't realise this a little bit earlier, and because in particular with new builds, because obviously there's been so many delays to the building due to builders being furloughed or having COVID or having to self-isolate. So there's been delay after delay after delay in building new homes. So somebody that agreed a sale within the stamp duty holiday, but because of one thing or another is now going to complete outside of that, they're not going to get the benefit.
I think you're absolutely right, and the gentleman who put this together is probably a little bit behind as opposed to being ahead of the game. Had he had put this petition out way ahead, I think it had legs. I think it's right in the sense that stamp duty should be effective of exchange of contract as opposed to completion. There are many reasons why sometimes completions can be delayed, and you rightly point out that if you're buying a brand new house and it's off the time scale in order to complete, then the buyer ends up paying a price in the stamp duty, or in a builder's case, maybe the builder has to then cough up and take something out of his profit and so forth. He's going to pay tax on the profit, and then he's going to pay tax on the stamp duty because he hasn't had the support. So I'm in agreement that, and have been, that it should be at exchange of contracts, and that way everybody knows where they are and everybody knows what their costs are going to be at that particular point. It's no good having this sort of thing hanging over your head. Will I or won't I? Do I? Don't I? Situation, and am I going to be? And then you create this absolute manic situation where people are trying to get across. So I think that we could have done much better in having this at exchange of contract as opposed to completion. And then this month we wouldn't have had the pressure on all our legal beagles trying to just get the completions done, and probably also take their attention off other stuff that they could have helped people with. I mean, I've known of law firms which we've been speaking to try and give, refer new business to, who just simply said, I can't take it. I can't take the new business because I've got this pile of completions I've got to do prior to it's not a good business model, So at exchange of contract, they could have had a chance to build their business even further. So I'm in agree with them, but let's see what the government says. The government, as you rightly say, will say thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah, we'll hear about it here first, that's for sure. We shall report on what the response is. Interesting also on that, of course, is that there's another point just here that's come to my mind, is the fact that, obviously a price is agreed for a new build with the builder at the time of buying off plan. But then, of course, with all these delays and with a market growing so fast, he's keen to complete the property because obviously he's losing out on the increase in the price of the property across the period of time when the market's been growing. So perhaps the buyer could take comfort from the fact that they've got a price that's fever, shall we call it? Race for space, that's it, or search for space, isn't it? The race for space. So they got a price prior to the race for space, so they've actually done quite well in the fact that the price hasn't increased over all that delay.
That's true, but nothing is worse than saying I didn't make the deadline and I've got to cough up 15 grand at the end. So that saving for race for space and being gallant will be assumed a deflate for race for space rather than a...
So, what do customers want from agents, Joe? You should know, you've been one.
40 years of it. They like a good chat, actually.
That's true. That's true. Communication is king, according to a new survey.
Communication is a song, isn't it? There's a song like that. Communication is the answer to the problems. You should know it. It's in our era. I mean, I can't even think who sang it. It'll come to me in a minute. Anyway, communication, and of course, communication has never been easier than it is today, because we have so many different ways to communicate. And if you don't want to chat to them and hear all of the stories, of course, people will use a WhatsApp message or a text message, or, of course, our learned friend, the email. That's always one. And there's some people who spend their life doing nothing but emails. The only thing with all of those written subjects is that you can never actually get the point across correctly, and you can often say things that you actually don't mean to say, and somebody reads
be misconstrued.
Reads it in a way that you don't expect them to read, and that sometimes can be a real problem for communication, because then you have another problem in that communication. So I think being slightly old-fashioned, pick up the phone and talk to them. That's the easiest thing,
Well,
really.
it's very interesting that you say all of that because you've pretty much summed up all the things that were in the survey.
Oh,
But
well,
it's
I'm going home
interesting.
now. That's it. Thanks for that. You've done.
Yeah. But what was top of people's lists, interestingly, is the importance of good recommendations and reviews. So, seeing that an agent has got plenty of reviews on wherever they are looking at their portal, shall we say, 99% people said they would want to see good recommendations and reviews. Um, Good email, as you mentioned, communication for non-urgent updates. And interestingly, 83% said WhatsApp was a great way of getting, or a video call was a good way of getting very important information or key moments in the deal across. And I guess that's reflected in our friends, the millennials, who find these new ways of communicating very acceptable compared to the more mature end of the market, shall we say. 69% of the 700 people surveyed said a physical branch or office to meet at in person was still really important. Now, we did discuss this a few weeks ago, and we said that we didn't need a branch anymore. But in this survey of 700 buyers, 69% said that it was important they had somewhere to meet them in person.
I totally agree, and I can tell you that we comply with all of the above. Um, as Town and Country Property Auctions London, and of course as Fairview, we have a base. Anybody wishing to come and have a cup of tea with us, or maybe a wee dram at the end of the day, is always welcome, and we'll happily discuss all your property matters and property needs that we need to do. And I think it's a great way. I like to have a one-to-one chat and understand. There's so much more you learn from each other, not about the client learning about us as agents acting for them, but for us to understand their needs and wants and desires in order to be able to fit the right property to the right person. And that is so key in that communication. In terms of emails, I agree that that is a good way to keep a tab, and it does actually reduce the time scale that you're having. So sometimes people just want to know that you've actually bothered to acknowledge that they've asked a question and you've actually dealt with it. It's probably the not doing. It's almost like not answering the phone or not making the phone call because you're going to get your ears bent and you've done something wrong, so you just avoid it. My view is just deal with it, and or now there are so many other options. If you don't want to speak to them, then you can certainly WhatsApp them. I've certainly used WhatsApp video calls and FaceTime. I have to say WhatsApp calls are just diabolical. I mean, you spend half your life saying hello, hello, hello. Are you still there? And so use an ordinary phone line to make the call. It's only a couple of pence in the grand scheme. When you're dealing with a £500,000 house, a few pence isn't going to kill you. But you use a proper line, the chances are we'll get a proper message. So I think all of those things are important. But communication, definitely. Having a branch or a base office is key. I think people do like to know that you are there and they can come in and discuss in private their personal circumstances. And I think, people should be agents and should be really, commended for the social work that we end up having to do. You don't realize how much we actually end up doing. We just don't get our praise because they just look at the fee access or the invoice. They forget the journey. And they forget the knocks that we've had, the information that, or lack of information, almost discovering things. So, yeah, I think it sums it up by communication. But pick up the phone and talk to me. I'm always available. My number's available anytime. And I think that is the key to a successful sale. And this is what we do. This is a good communication. We are communicating every week, Sunday morning. Paul and I are here doing just that, communicating all the things about the property market, the property industry, and what matters in the property world.
And interesting that you were mentioning the sort of service you provide. So many times agents will do a valuation and then not get an instruction, but there is still no charge for that service.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we do so much work. I mean, I've got a stack of them on my table where people come in and go, I want to do this, I want to do that. As research has to go on, you have to, present that to the client, make sure that it meets their needs. We can do this thing. So I think you don't get the praise for the amount of work because unfortunately the only bit that anyone sees, and it's not their fault, anyone sees is the bit at the end, and that's the bit that's painful, and that's all saying, "Oh, we just had to pay him loads of money to do that." But the fact is, there was a journey in order to achieve that, and then when it's relative to what you achieve for them, then it's a very different situation, and they forget that part that we've actually helped them achieve the goal that they wanted, and there's a price to be paid. The irony of all of that is they're happy to go and pay a legal beagle, no questions asked. They go and pay an accountant, no questions asked. They'll probably pay a financial advisor, no questions asked. But guess what? Who's the pivotal between all of those people? It's the agent, and they'll always moan about that.
Mm-hmm. Last story of the week, an important time date tomorrow it will pass, which of course is the current ban on rental property evictions enforced by bailiffs in England will finish on Bank Holiday Monday. So you were not allowed to evict anyone suffering from COVID or who was self-isolating since pretty much the beginning of the pandemic. And anybody else, there was a 6-month wait. Now that reduces as of June the 1st, doesn't it, Joe, to 4 months? Important milestone.
Yeah, so this is quite an important story. I'm glad you brought that up, Paul. It's been looming now throughout the pandemic. A lot of people, especially the landlords, have suffered quite heavily on this. And part of it is genuine, and part of it is just people taking the Michael. Really, they're just thinking, "Oh well, nothing can be done about it, so I'll do what I can." And that resulted in the government making some changes. The reason why the government made those changes as an academic, just an ordinary guy on the street, is because they just didn't want lots and lots of people being homeless during the pandemic and having that burden to house them somewhere when pandemic was there, and they had all sorts of logistical issues that was going to cause problems. So the landlord has suffered. The landlord has had tenants in their properties, and the tenants, in some cases, have extracted the Michael in the nicest possible way, and just thought, well, you can't do anything about it, so I'll do what I need to. So, as of tomorrow, Monday, the 1st of June, that
Tuesday.
Tuesday, that holiday that they've had is over. Bailiffs will be knocking on the doors, and bailiffs are probably itching to do that because they make their bonuses every time they turn up and drop a letter through your door and so forth. And the courts have been told that there are pilot schemes that have been running where people, the courts, because the courts have not been open, they've been told to actually have like a dialogue between tenants and landlords, some sort of arbitration, some sort of resolution to be able to negotiate the issue. That will probably stay going forward because I think that's a format that's not a bad format to think about. Saves the time on courts. The time was extended from, it was a two months notice, but that then got immediately extended to 6 months.
Yeah.
Now that's falling back to 4 months. And again, it's an interim, and then it's going to go from 4 months to 2 months again, all being well by the end of October of this year. So some sort of normality will happen. The courts will get busy, so tenants need to either quickly make up their payments or be ready to be evicted. And I think landlords just can't wait for this to happen on Tuesday because, a lot of them haven't had the money from their tenants or for some reason not been paid, but have to pay their own mortgages, their own buy-to-let commitments. So subsequently, so this is probably a very, very welcome news, but good news for landlords that, maybe they can see a bit of light at the end of the tunnel now. And bad news for the tenants, your time is up.
It's interesting that the lettings representation agencies like Nala Ala, these people, they seem to be suggesting that the government should step in to help, because there's an estimated 210,000 people who may face severe difficulties in paying back their rent that they have in arrears. And they're saying that the government should step in and sort that out, because obviously there isn't the capacity in the courts to deal with all this stuff. But the government has gone down the route of mediation, and there is a trial process going on where there is mediation between the parties to avoid the courts, which would be good, because the courts do need to be free for the genuine cases, things like antisocial behaviour, or where someone's just being belligerent and won't pay because they don't want to, rather than that they can't. So those are the places that the courts should be, or those are the cases that should be coming before the court. Mediation would seem to be a good suggestion, but people are saying that there isn't enough mediation going on. It's still going to have to go to court, and there needs to be reform of the whole system.
I think, well, this is what I said. They've been trying these mediation idea, and I think that is a good idea going forward. There's no question in my mind about that. I think people should be able to resolve, and often it's a standoff that basically doesn't resolve, because we just say I'm not going to do it. They say I'm not going to do it. So of course it ends up in court, because everybody thinks that the court's going to sort everything out for them. But everything has a cost in that journey. So mediation, I think, is a good way of dealing with it. And if that's the way to develop that, then that's something that everybody should look at. In terms of the government, I asked the question, really. I mean, how much and what else can the government actually end up doing? I mean, the government has actually supported quite well in this last 18 months throughout the pandemic. And what has happened really is, I think that the tenants are probably, as I said, they've extracted the Michael. They know they've had the money. They've been given support in every possible way, and they just haven't paid them their dues when it should have been done. A majority of them probably will do. They'll probably pay it as it now falls very, very quickly. But it's just been a bit of a pain on top of it, knowing that you can't get in. I mean, we know the experiences as agents we've had, for getting a viewing. A tenant will just turn around and say, I don't want to show somebody around a property because, I'm isolating, or I'm not going to do that, or I can't do that for 14 days, or I can't do this. So, whilst there are genuine circumstances, and I understand that is the case, I think sometimes people have taken the use of that availability of excuse to delay the things that they've needed to delay. And so certainly for landlords, I think this is today, are saying this, and as of Tuesday, it's a welcome. They just couldn't wait any longer. So I think there'll be a queue at the courts, really.
Mm. Well, I'm delighted we're about to play our part in the race for space now, Joe, as we introduce a property that's been added to Town and Country Property Auctions, which is a lovely little country pile in Lingfield. Do you want to talk us through this beautiful little baby?
Yeah, this is a lovely little house. I say little, it's not so little. It's quite a grand house, really. In Lingfield, sort of West Sussex side of the world, off the M25. It's about 20 minutes away from the M25. Lovely Grade 2 listed character property with some outbuildings. We took this. This is an interesting property, really, in terms of the subject we've covered, Paul. And so here we are to guide you through it was on the market. The client had actually put it on the market with a local agent at a price of £1.45 million. And whilst there was a lot of tire kickers and lookers, there weren't any takers, because it was probably excessive in its price, and it's really governed by time. And the client wanted to get it moved. We're instructed Thursday last week we put it live. Or should I say, Thursday this week, because it's still this week, Sunday. We put it live, and we've guided it at £1 million. Which was £450,000 less than what it was advertised for previously. And lo and behold, because it was pitched right, it was guided right, we are in negotiations as of yesterday, so 2 days after the property went live, with two potential candidates at the sort of price that our client is considering maybe selling at. So it will go to auction, but it's likely to be sold prior to auction. What a beautiful property. And it just goes to show that if you've got it right, like I said earlier on, within the first 10 days of something that's on the market at the right money, you will sell it. And it's very important to take that view. What you have to take in mind always with this is that everybody has access to data now. You all know what's out there. It's not a secret thing from we haven't got a little red book under the table that tells us how much it's going to be worth. It is just, what the market does. But a beautiful house, lovely location, grade 2 listed, unbelievable views over farmland across there. You can see right the way across there. Anyone wants to look at it, give us a call. But more than anything else, anyone who wants the realistic sale of their property at the right guidance, right advice, then I'm your man. Call me.
Fantastic. A lovely place, and you could play a lovely game of bowls on that lawn. It's as level as I've ever seen one.
That's the new thing now, isn't it, Paul? I was thinking about that the other day. I thought maybe, or maybe it's my time of life that I'm thinking about. I should sort of roll a few of those bowls out there. But apparently, it's either croquet or bowls will work really well on that lawn.
Lovely. That's a beautiful property. Really nice, and great to see that one. We're interested to see how that all transpires. Any other thoughts as we wrap up this Sunday morning?
Well, we had an amazing result this week on a property. Again, just guided by the same thing, really. But a property at £250,000 guided in southeast London, and unbelievable amount of interest. I think over 100 people registered to bid to buy the property. Our client was happy to sell it prior, just at the last minute, because the offer that they had was well within what they wanted to achieve, and didn't want to take the risk of the clock, the actual counter, and so forth. And we got £90,000 over the guide price on that, which is phenomenal. And again, it tells you the story about pitching and pricing it right in order to achieve the goals. And the gavel fell, and the completions in a couple of weeks in June sometime. But the point is that it goes back to the old adage of, if you got it right and you've done the right homework and it's pitched right, within the first 10 days, it should be sold. And if it hasn't, then it's definitely down to price, because price generate, and the market is showing you that. Look at the figures and statistics you've been saying. How many people are buying? How many people are interested? How many people are looking? All of those things are happening, and they're looking and buying and seeing. They know what is right, and they know what they want to pay for. And if the price is right, the gavel will fall. So I think it's exciting times, and we will see some changes that happen. But you've still got to keep your house in order. You still got to keep the basics right. It's springtime, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, the gardens need looking at, the outsides need looking at, and they all add value to your home. And I'll continue to use that mantra time in, day in, day out. It's very, very important. I know, everybody sort of has a little grin about it, but it's very important to do.
And that's what the rest of my Sunday is going to be involving, is keeping that garden just about right. It's the first opportunity we've really had to get out there this year, really, to be honest.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm just going to sit out there and have enjoy a nice glass of beer or something, and just take it in. And I'd just be thinking about you while you're cutting your lawn and whizzing through it. Yeah. But knowing you will definitely have either a pint by the side or one with a straw nearby. So I'm sure it'll be good fun. So enjoy the Sunday that is there. We look forward to your version of the garden next week.
That says so much, Joe, doesn't it? I'm sat there with a pint doing it myself. You're sat there with a glass of Chardonnay having somebody else do it for you. And on that bombshell. And on that bombshell this week, I think we shall call it a day. So I hope you found all the stories that we brought to you very interesting. Certainly plenty to discuss today. Thank you for your contributions. And please do join us again next Sunday when we'll have another Property Matters.